GBO. And so I'm watching it with the grandkids, showing them how the neat stuff is here. And I've been doing that. And then Andrew comes up and talks about FRBs. And the problem with that was, it's like, I know where he lives. I have to see if I can twist his arm. And he was gracious enough to say yes. So
I don't know how it feels to have an internet stalker, but it's but it is a milestone. So, all right, like he says, a lot of my research here is based upon fast radio bursts, and I'm just going to give you a quick outline of this talk and how we're going to go through this journey of trying to explain what these things are. So first, we're going to deal with one of the misconceptions about radio astronomy. We're going to use that as an analogy for some of our basic methods of how we search for these events. We're going to talk about pulsars. I assume that a lot of people here are somewhat familiar with pulsars by now with the particular radio background. And then we'll talk about some of the FRB discoveries we've made, that's been made, the things that they were being confused with. We'll talk about one particular source that I had a lot of efforts in, and then we'll follow it up with current and future efforts in the field. So, I'm not sure where or when it happened, but there's this big misconception that within radio astronomy that we're listening the whole time, and that we're listening to sound, right? But we can use this analogy in a lot of ways. Sound is a wave. The radio spectrum comes into us in waves of different frequencies. We have devices that turn those waves into voltages. So in sound, we have microphones. So for this iPad up here, it doesn't care which direction that sound comes from. It just wants to capture sound from all directions. But if you are concerned about which direction it is, you can get a higher grade microphone that focuses to where that sound is. And that's essentially what we have here in the radio wave, is that we have a device that we can focus and determine where our radio waves are coming from. And then you need something to process those voltages. And I'm going to be using an iPad for a lot of this stuff, so you have a computer of some sort. And in our control room, you'll notice that we have banks of computers to process those voltages in many different ways. So this isn't a bad analogy, but I don't want anyone walking away thinking that radio is sound. All right? So I think we're all maybe familiar with this as well. Yeah. So as we have voltages that come in and change with time, we can essentially break those down into different frequency components. If you were to sum all those waves together, you would get that original voltage, and each one of those waves contribute some amount, which is known as its amplitude. All right, and so we've taken our quote-unquote chunk of time and converted it into its frequency components. Right? All right, well, the one trick that we do is that we just don't do this once. We break our entire observing session into small chunks. So, but if you break it into small chunks, so you may have a time series that comes across here, you will take a small snippet, do the same thing that we saw on the other slide, and you'll get your amplitude spectrum. And then you'll take the next chunk of time, do the same thing, rinse, lather, and repeat. But there's a trade-off, I think many people in here know, is that you have to trade off your time resolution and for your frequency resolution. So if you have a small chunk of time, you're going to have a large uncertainty in your frequency, but if you take a large chunk of time, you can have finer resolution into your frequency as well. So if you're looking for something that's not changing with time, you'll do longer time samples. And if you're looking for something that's changed with time on a very quick time scale, you'll lose frequency resolution. So you can then take this and do it kind of in a real-time sense. So I give this talk to many people, all sorts of ages, and so this one file, let me see if I can on displays there. I get that also this page there. So one particular time that this came up in the public culture was with this sound file. So that was the original sound file that a person pulled off the internet. And here you can kind of see that whole frequency versus time spectrum of it, and this is what it would look like. But then, when he recorded it on his computer, it got distorted and sounded something like this. And depending upon your perspective of that day, this second file may sound like Laurel or Yanny, depending upon your ear, right? And some days I can hear Laurel, some days I can hear Yanny, but in our data, we can see that there's a difference between the two, and we can see that there was a distortion between the two. And that's basically why we use computers and not our ears, so we can do this. The fun little trick you can do is you take your own voice, Laurel, and be able to do the same distortion to it, Laurel, and maybe able to change that. I personally can't hear the Yanny anymore after doing this so long. I just hear the Laurel. So, we will be doing the same thing with basically my telescope here, right? So this is the program that I use to make all these plots and so forth. And make the sound file, that comes up onto the computer, I play it back on the computer and do that. So if you're looking for a single tone, it will come up as a whistle, or a tone will be like that. But you may have discrete events that you don't care about that type of resolution. And clicks and so forth will go across a wider frequency. So you can pass this around as the talk goes on, and you can convince yourself that that's not connected to my computer in any way. So if we were to take data from the telescope, it's not called a spectrogram like the sound was. It's called a dynamic spectrum. So we have frequency and time that's changing as well. And sometimes we get events that come into the telescope that may sound like this, from the telescope's perspective, right? And it comes at regular intervals, and it has a sweeping pattern. And sometimes it's fast, well, sometimes it's slow, other times it's fast. Right, so for some period of time this was a mystery, but I think many of us are familiar now with the, oh, no, okay. We may have to hear it again, sorry. This is the problem with putting so many graphics in. But what's happening here is that we have a neutron star, so after a supernova it can collapse. It could go to a black hole, but it could also be here and collapse down to neutron material. But the magnetic field forces the emission out through the poles, and as it rotates around, and every time it passes your line of sight, you'll get a chirp, or you'll get a beep, or a flash. AKA, they're pulsating stars, AKA pulsars. Right? So that explains pretty much why they're kind of set intervals apart. But why do we have this sweeping pattern? It's due to the fact that there's actually some material between us and the pulsar, right? There's free electrons, there's electrons that are just floating out there, and what that does, that impedes the lower frequencies and they arrive later, okay? And so with our methods, what we normally do is that we will take and we'll kind of blindly sweep over our DM parameter, which is set here by our time. And once we get to a point where our signal has been maximized, aka everything sums up straight up and down, then we know that we have the proper DM measurement that left. We've corrected for all the distortion, for the DM distortion that between us and the pulsar. And that gives us a direct measurement of the electron density from us to there. So now if you know the distances,
And that's just a sweep. That's not.
yeah, you can do this in yeah, so you're just changing the DM parameter, and you can do this in smart ways and knowing what intervals to take, but you're going to change that DM value until you've maximized your signal. Okay? And so now, You have 2,000 some pulsars that are out there. You're able to measure their distances. You have a measurement of the electron density to those pulsars. You can start to map kind of the electron density changes around our environment, aka the galaxy. Right? So here we live, the galactic center's down here. We can see that when the contour lines are closer together, that's when you have large changes. And there's a lot of large changes going on as kind of we get closer to the galactic center. But as we move anti-center, this takes a longer amount of distance to make the same amount of change. And the same thing can be said about looking off the plane as well. If you look in the plane, you can see that you're going to get the most amount of electron density change and get the most dm. But if you look off the plane, you don't expect a large amount of dm, of electron density. All right, so we can set an expectation of how much maximum dm, if we were to look through the galaxy in any direction that we're looking. It's basically, we have some expectation of that, of what our galaxy is going to contribute. Now, there's several reasons why we want to find more and more pulsars to expand pulsar science, and we were doing surveys. Well, my PhD advisor was doing surveys of the small galactic cloud. I can't talk. But when doing a mapping of this region, of course, you have some off pointings on that at times as well. And during one of those off pointings, which was not part of the main cloud, they found an event like this. Just one of those. I mean, we get 1,000 of those types of events from a millisecond pulsar. So what makes this one so special compared to those other events? Sure, it's bright, it has that sweeping pattern. But if you were to look at the amount that we expected, or the amount of sweep that we would expect for that line of sight, it would only contribute the green part of this point. The rest of this sweep from here to here was unaccounted for. And so you got to remember the definition of our dispersion measure. So it's the electron density integrated over the line of sight. So you have two things you can play with. One, either the electron density is a lot larger, and it's within our galaxy, aka along the line of sight. Or the line of sight has increased by a lot as well, aka this event may be extragalactic. All right, so there was a lot of debates about this source and whether it was parameter A or parameter B that was contributing to this sweep. There was a problem, though, from the same telescope, the Parkes telescope in Australia. They were finding these events as well. They're known as paratons. So this is a mystical creature that casts a shadow of a human being. So basically it's posing as something else. And they have these kind of events that cause larger than expected type of dispersion measures, but this doesn't follow the equation exactly, right? But it had this kind of these would give false detections into the telescope, and many people were being dismissive as to why these were occurring, and basically saying, well, if these are occurring all the time at this telescope, clearly the Lorimer burst isn't a physical thing. But they started to do histograms of when these things were being detected, and you can see at the local time here that shortly after noon, there was a main peak of when these things were occurring. Any idea what could happen around noontime at an observatory?
Lunch.
Lunch, yeah, exactly. So, what was happening was people were going to lunch. They would start the microwave up, and they didn't want to wait the last few seconds of the cycle, and they would open the microwave door, and the winding down of the magnetron in there would cause these type of patterns. Right? So they were actually able to get the two microwaves on site and be able to characterize their DM on site as well. It's a good reason. But the Lorimer burst itself was detected nearly at midnight. So that brought a lot of, unless there was one particular person there heating their coffee at midnight. But these were primarily in the visitor center, and there would be no need to be in those locations. So confident that the warmer burst was real, people started searching, mainly the Parkes telescopes themselves, and they found, probably 20 more FRB events. Okay? There was also an FRB event that was discovered here in archival data as well from the Green Bank telescope during this period of time. So at this point in time, we're confident that these events are coming from the cosmos. We're still not confident as to where they're coming from, whether there's a high density region in our own galaxy or whether they're really, really far away. So, what were the theories? We having these primarily one-off events. None of these seem to repeat an occurrence. You would find them randomly in your data and then follow up, hundreds of hours of follow-up on these events, and they would never see another one again. So they were assuming if they are at cosmological distances, the energetics of these things would, lack of a better term, be astronomical, right? And so you're talking about cataclysms, neutron stars smashing each other, the very end of the life of black holes, cosmic strings, all these things. And of course, aliens is kind of the particle physics of astronomy. If you don't know what it is, you can always put it into the alien blanket. But we then found this repeater. Well, we found this FRB at Arecibo, and doing follow-up studies, many like was done before of other FRBs, they repeated. There's more than one event, right? And so here's a set of 11 events that we had for the repeater. So what's that mean? Well, if it is extragalactic, it's still going to be very large energy, but now it's reoccurring, right? So all the catastrophic models essentially get thrown out the window, right? You can't destroy it in a huge flash or bang anymore. That it's coming from the same source and in the same region of the sky.
What's the time frame of those observations?
So you have
Like
months, I think.
months, several months.
Yeah. But what can you do when you know a source repeats? You can study it again and again, and you can hone in about where it's coming from. And so there was two efforts that we were a part of to do this. First, there was the VLA in New Mexico, which was able to localize to a certain region. What's that? Oh. Okay. And then we then were able to phase up telescopes from Europe and other places and get even a higher localization of where these bursts were coming from. We were able to pinpoint that to a host galaxy, right? And from the optical, the Space Hubble, we're able to kind of narrow it down to perhaps a star-forming region of that galaxy. And this is billions of light years away. So this is a redshift of 0.23, I believe, if my memory doesn't fail me. So now we've kind of ruled out, we know where it lives, we know the neighborhood it's in, still don't quite know what it is, right? But we can rule out kind of the electron density part and those arguments as well from doing this method. We followed up an X-ray and gamma rays and all sorts of other events, and we got no information from the source. So we had to go back to our data and see if we could tease out any more information from the radio data. And the initial burst would look something like this. And what happens is that, remember you have this sweep, and if you're taking a huge channel, you're losing frequency resolution. That sweep's going across your whole frequency channel, right? But now we have some kind of expectation for this source, and we know about what the DM is going to do, so we can correct for that smearing, or correct for that across each subchannel as well, right? And if we were to do that, we'll get a clearer picture. And so when we started observing what's known as coherent mode, we were able to get clearer pictures, and what started to show is that we have the wrong DM on a lot of these bursts. There's actually sub-features within this burst, and if we align those up from burst to burst, our variance drops. We got a much more consistent DM measurement from burst to burst. Yes?
When you set your hearing mode, are you integrating on the time domain still with that, or frequency still?
So what you're doing,
What is time, what is,
right, so the coherent, the coherent mode is essentially, I guess you could see it as a match filtering, where you know the DM and you put in a chirp, and then that chirp will correct for what you're at that DM. Right? So you have these sub channels. Let's say this is your frequency channel, and if I was just recorded, right, there would still be this sweep in that channel given some block of time, right? But I can correct for that before I record, right? Which then brings everything sharper for that particular pixel or whatever you have, right? And so that's what you're doing here. You're making, instead of having this smeared out between channels and other things, you're correcting for that to get the best quality data as possible, is the takeaway. But we're getting these, what we ended up calling subburst features, and aligning to those subburst features, we're getting a more consistent picture of the electron density measurement. Okay? But, so here's kind of the family photo of a lot of those. And you can see that a lot of these have kind of these rather distinct subbursting features that come in perhaps 2 or 3, but there seems to be a kind of a downward trend to a lot of these. If you were wondering what it may sound like by the source, it might have sounded something like that. This has been extended for a factor of 50, I believe. So this whole event here is only a few milliseconds long. So this is, this here you have about a 20 millisecond window on each one of these. So from here to here is about 10 milliseconds. Okay? So these things are rather short, but clearly energetic. What's going on? So I'll turn this around this way. So there's some, just to touch on it, there's some models that can explain why we're getting subbursts. Maybe there's some sort of cloud or plasma, and there's essentially echoes that are coming off that. But there's still yet to be a good model explaining why there's this linear slope from there to there. So that's what that's trying to show. Again, we weren't getting stuff from other locations, so we tried different frequency bands. Now that we have it localized, we can move to smaller frequencies. And Atlasburg was one of the first telescopes that were able to do this, and they were able to detect up to 5 gigs. And so that's the burst there. During this period of time, trying to cut my teeth on radio astronomy as a postdoc, we decided to put in a up-down converter. That would mean something, I'm sure, to this group. And we were able to get C-band available at our telescope as well. And when we were able to do that, we were able to get a lot more bursts. And we still see some complex structures in these, but this burst here particularly was on the scale of a few microseconds, this one feature. Something, and now using light travel time for something to do that on a few microseconds, you're talking a very compact source, right? So the light travel time on a few microseconds confines it down to basically probably a compact source like a neutron star. So up to now, we looked at the data, and we looked at the polarization of the light that's coming through. Pulsars and other things can have polarized light as well, and that usually implies that the emission of the light is coming, it's confined in the way that it's emitting, right? So it only allowed to oscillate up and down in one direction. So when we looked at C-band, we also looked at the polarization. But first of all, at the lower frequencies, we were finding no polarization whatsoever. Okay? And when we started to look at C-band, we started to see these ripples. So here you can kind of see each component of the polarization, and you see this kind of sinusoidal pattern going across your frequency. And the reason why you have this sinusoidal pattern is basically a birefringence. So if you have your wave that's oscillating up and down, now the local magnetic field has confined how it emitted, right? But then that wave propagates to you. So as it propagates through its own galaxy, that magnetic field of the galaxy can cause the light to actually rotate. You see a similar process in materials. And so as you go through a material, different frequencies can be rotated, and they get rotated at different rates. And that's essentially what this part of the equation is saying. So high for low frequencies, we're getting rotated a lot more. So when we were down at L band and lower frequencies, it was getting rotated so fast that it spun around several times, even within one channel. When we finally went up to C band and so forth, we can now start to characterize the polarization of the light, and we're able to tell that it had to come from a magnetic. Its magnetic field from its galaxy was strong as well. And to drive this point home, so we have that previous measurement we talked about, we had the DM that we've talked about, and both have these integrals. So if you take one over the other, you essentially get a weighted average of the magnetic field along that line of sight. And so if you were to do this same trick with stuff in our own galaxy, you have a trend line of the average magnetic field along the line of sight. There's only a few things that change this average that are within our galaxy, one of those being a source that's close to the galactic center. All right? And here is kind of the uncertainty region for our FRB. And clearly, this source is not related in any way to these sources down here. So it's driving the point home that this is extragalactic, and that the field around the local environment is strong as well. With that said, that kind of tells you of the extended environment of how it had to propagate through. Breakthrough Listen did some studies as well at even higher frequencies. They're going up to 8 gigs here, and they found a lot more burst as well to test out the hardware that's here at Greenback. So what's the narrative that we can paint for this particular source? Is that one, it's compact, one, it's energetic, and the magnetic field strength is analogous to if it was around its galactic center. So we're thinking a young magnetar around a black hole in a star-forming region of a galaxy, right? So that's only one source, though. So there's still a lot of unknowns. We kind of can tell you about everything between us and it, but we can't tell you much about it itself. So we want to do more studies on other FRBs. So here's one that's going on ASCAP, and they found up to 20 new FRBs as well. No repetitions and over 1,000 hours observed for many of these sources. One of the big things that's coming online is Chime. Chime has released its first paper, and it's discovered 12 bursts, but it was able to find a repeater as well. So there's another repeater out there that I think there's 2 or 3 repeaters since that initial discovery, and follow-up papers on that are yet to be released. But you can kind of see here that with pulsars and other things, we were getting a full spectrum across, but FRBs may jump around and be somewhat band limited. ASCAP doing studies as well, being able to localize to another galaxy, and even larger redshift. Okay, other things, and another localization as well, but not pinpointed to a direct galaxy. There may be a few candidates here. One thing we're doing here is that we constantly have a commensal project that's using the L-band receiver and constantly searching for FRBs as well, scanning the sky, trying to build up our statistics and try to build up our understanding of FRBs. So there's still a lot to learn. It's still a great mystery, but that kind of tells you the narrative of what we know so far about the FRBs and the environments that they live in. So Any questions?
How many folks do you have working on that here?
So there's, depending upon which, so Breakthrough Listen has a few people who are working on it. Of course, they're interested in techno signatures is the term now, and they're trying to follow up on that. And so if we can get some for free with that effort, we're willing to do that. And there's a collaboration there. I would say it's in the hundreds of people who are working on this around the world, right? But then you divide that by 3 or 4 different groups, and then you're talking about, and that's including probably students that are working on it. Okay.
How strong is one typical one in Jansky?
So it varies, and it even varies with the repeater. So the repeater may be low to very marginal with Arecibo, and then we've had up to single strengths of 129 with Arecibo as well. But I think it can be on the scale of a Jansky or something like that, of course, depending upon the time of this and stuff. Yeah.
For such fast bursts, you said 50 microseconds, what's your integration?
So for a lot of what we're doing we're talking about I think for Arecibo and stuff, we do about 62 microseconds per spectrum. And then here we do about 80 some things kind of the same.
So you're able to, the 50 microsecond FRB will stand out in that?
So you can,
Yeah, 1%.
right, so that 50 is a rough estimate of that 60.
But still,
Yeah, so that burst is there and it's dispersed, and when you disperse it, you get basically a 1 pixel.
yeah.
Right, that was limited by the device and not so much the event, but that's enough to limit kind of the emission region that it would have to come from.
It's enough processing gain with one occurrence, basically, to see.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have a unique, each one of these bursts are varying on different time scales and different things, and then that one happens to be really sharp. And so, it's luck, it's a game of luck. Because it's firing off all the time, and it happens to fire when we look at it at other times.
Is there any light or gamma ray associated with?
No, so we've looked at X-ray and gamma rays, and we haven't, and there's been bursts during those observations, or closely approximated, and there's no uptick. But of course, you're talking about really long distances.
So how much energy do you think is this event when it occurs?
It all depends upon different factors. If it's emitting in all directions, it's going to be huge. If it's beamed, and it all depends upon how tightly that's beamed in your direction, then the energy can come down. Right? So it's a game you have to play back and forth. But there's the times 10 to the 20 some hertz or whatever that was mentioned earlier. So. Any other questions? I hope I haven't put you to sleep. No. When you've written the programs, you can do anything. That's what
What was the app that you was running around?
that's called Spectrum View. I think it's Oxford Research that uses that.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
No worries.
Well, I said I'd do something real easy, and this is a little quick recap of what we did at the Western Conference. So it was in Colorado. What?
Yay!
Yeah, that's, so do something wrong. You know, Colorado, well, you're down one, so I still got 2. Here's my notes.
This is actually from the movie Sleeper.
That's from Sleeper?
Yeah,
They had an car in it.
Yeah, well,
Where was the orgasm from? No,
That was
That
on
was in-
I-70.
that's
Oh,
on
really?
I-70, you can go. you can go
this is
right
the
on
Flatirons,
that.
sort of above Boulder, and it's University Corporation for Atmospheric Research in cars.
in car.
Well, it used to be in.
And,
It used to be, now it's.
yeah, so their main product is climate modeling, and this is one of their headquarters. They have about 6 buildings in the neck of the woods, and they obviously have a lot of customers, and they sell data to it, even to NASA and to NOAA. So they have a bunch of neat stuff. So that we basically met here for the orientation, and it was a little show and tell. They actually have an old Cray-1 computer downstairs. It's not hooked up, can't toggle bits on it, but I had never seen her touch one, so it was there. They had a little information brochure about expedition they took, and they took this fancy telescope with a chronograph, I guess, in it, so that you can block out the sun. So you can see the corona, and the telescope is right there in their display, and the Flatirons are behind it. So it's a neat area. Didn't quite expect to see it. Our conference was in this building, closer to
The motel.
right?
Yeah, the motel,
And right beside the motel.
yes.
So when you enter this building, you would see this gentleman right here. And he was just pondering and ready to give you your pamphlet, take your money and everything. So it worked out. David was an exceptional host. And what was funny about this is Lori Wingate. Lori was here at Green Bank. And then she went to VLA, and we had our conference in VLA. And then she went here, and Lori was still there. And it's like, David found her there. It's like, well, you're following us. She said, no, you're following us. It's me. She said, everywhere I go, y'all keep coming.
That's such a neat person, you know?
So, just a small room, but we had it, and that was one of her bosses, and he was doing a real good presentations about the sun. He didn't really want the presentation to get out, so I couldn't get a copy of it, but those are little lines of different polarity of the sunspots and the sun near the equator in that picture. So,
He also talks about reproducibility, how you could actually predict.
yes, he's saying something next year, the sun's going to get real active, so the ham guys may finally like it. This is our fearless leader sitting in the back with his mouth open. So
Yeah, guess what, he's tired.
he awake? I don't know with that one. I knew that I could crack on with that.
He's wearing the same shirt.
And my favorite subject was the food, and David did a knockout job of.
Well, actually, this is due to Jay Wilson, and I have to give him all the credit in the
Okay.
world for organizing this. Jay did a superb job in rounding up the food and presenting it to us, and I can't say enough about his abilities in this area. So you got to give credit
All
to Jay
hail
Wilson.
Jay.
Yeah.
All hail Jay.
So, the food arrived on time, and we ate it. It was good.
Looks like sales of crap.
The breakfast was at the hotel, and our dinner we went out for extravaganzas, and that is proof that we did have people there, and we were there.
Lots of good people.
This is Miss Lori.
He is awake. Oh.
Went to Table Mountain, and it's kind of hard to get some information. Go back and look at a Wikipedia article on it, but the the Commerce Division of the United States government, which has a lot to do with NIST, when they got started, they did a lot of stuff up on Table Mountain. It was just a little map, and where we were, it was real easy to get to. And Terry,
All the definitive antenna.
Bullets. Well, Terry actually works on Table Mountain. He's got an office, but he has some stuff there. He's doing a lot of atmospheric research. He'll bounce 10 kilowatts off of a couple antennas and receive it. There's a bunch of stuff going on there. Well, I say that was a neat place because I'll get to where I'm going. There are some antennas that came from Uncle Sam on the Navy. You can see the Navy looking, who they were doing some research with.
So those are the sister antennas of the one that Rich Russell has down as well.
It's coming. This was a neat one. I don't know exactly which white square, but if you ever go to, like, especially spaceweather.com or any HAMS stuff, the planetary K-index, the main magnetometer in the world is on Table Mountain. And I've been told it's in some white square box. So I got a picture. Let's see. Where's the other one? Yeah, it's not here.
There's the stick with the apple.
No, there's one of them that's fuzzy and one of them that's not. This is the fuzzy one. So I just thought it was neat. It was also, Jay took a couple of these pictures and there was an elk up there on top of the mountain one day. Which I don't
heard of
see
that.
all the
There was
time.
actually a herd of them.
Now, in one of the buildings we entered, any ham guy would know, that's a cool bird, dummy love. Well, it was used as a doorstop.
Oh, this is a crime against.
Yes, I know that. I see other people are just, so I'm just telling you, this is a official doorstop up there. It was still working, still in good shape. The oil was still, I picked it up and made sure, it was in good. So that's kind of what you get. So it's like, everybody's wanting to take it home.
And it did a great job on the door.
That's in one of the buildings, the Deep Space Exploration Society, which a lot of people remember of, but mainly Rich was showing you where they got the telescope out. They had sort of this building, which is attached to the telescope you're fixing to see. They did a lot of rework, they did some stuff in it, and then there was some bad blood happened, and they kind of got kicked out. So that's when they went to the telescope about 2 hours away. So there's just a telescope here, there's a similar one here, and if you go out about 3 hours out of Denver, near Haswell is where they have the telescope that Rich talks about. And this was actually doing tropospheric ducting for Project Alice. Alice was distant early warning line radar to communicate between radar sites in Canada, because somebody was scared to death of these bombers coming over, the Russian Bear bombers coming over with bombs back in the 50s. So they did a bunch of communication studies of bouncing signals sort of off the top of the ionosphere at 2 to 600 meg or so. So that's what they, and they did at higher frequencies. So there was waveguide and stuff going up, but just a neat little picture. And yes, we did our other most favorite subject. We went that evening to, help me out,
Trace margaritas.
Trace margaritas.
Trace
And so it was good, everybody was liking it. Then after that, this is a daytime picture, but this is kind of going to where I was going to some information about. I visited two things that were really neat. I didn't quite expect it. I shouldn't have discounted these guys, but this is Little Thompson Observatory. There is somehow a radio telescope dish there now, and just
It was
grabbed it off.
it's around,
Yeah,
you can't
I
see
grabbed it off the internet this afternoon, but I couldn't get a better picture of it. They have two very nice instruments, and sort of I'll say 2.5. There's a 6-inch spotting scope that has the most clarity vision, best vision I've ever seen on it. They have
That was her father's. That was her father's. Her father donated that
Yeah.
scope.
Yeah, I remember that issue, and there was a 20-inch, an 18-inch, or 22-inch,
24-inch.
and 18. And
So it's just right.
it just, you don't, and it's on a facility that's attached to help me out, a high school, but it's right across from Jay's house, so if you go there, you might can beg. And it just was just a cool spot. And so going in, I did have some great pictures, but the kids had painted stuff on the wall of a lot of the constellations, and one of our members had his guide dog with him. And there's this picture of Terry, and they're in one of the rooms.
That's the radio room.
And there's, clear, bright eyes, starry skies. And so they're looking at that. One of our guys in the building's here, so if I mispronounce his name, he'll get upset.
Beautiful.
Now, after we left that, the next day I got up and I had to drive 3.5 hours out east, and I was dreading. Well, after I passed Aurora, Colorado, the roads opened up. And about an hour later, you're going along and you then take a road south, and there's a bunch of wind turbines up there. They were all neat. I wish I'd had another hour to go. And I finally, after about an hour out of that, I just realized that I was missing it. If you like open spaces, if you like, fortunately it's brown, it's not green, it was the most amazing thing to me, because it was just like, I stopped. I would drive 20 minutes, I did this like 3 or 4 times, 20 minutes at a time, not see any cars, nothing. So if you don't like that, don't go, but if you'd like to get out of traffic, it was really just about spiritual event. Also, they have there was an old abandoned railroad line that actually, Jay was telling me that they were trying to, somebody was bought and they're trying to resurrect. They had a lot of the telegraph poles, and I was seeing a little VLF in town. So I found one down and got a 12-inch souvenir piece. I want something about it. And same thing, just real neat picture. There's a telegraph don't see that in my neck of the woods, of course, open sky. We have airplanes, we had green trees going there, that's true, but I don't get to see that. Those are not mountains, there's some clouds in the background, so it was fairly flat in the high plateau. We stayed at Eats, there's a nice little motel there, and when you mentioned, they smile when you say you're a radio astronomer, they actually know how to spell the word, and so they were glad we were there. All the towns in that neck of the woods, obviously, is agriculture, and you'll go about 20 miles or so, and you'll see a grain elevator in the distance, and then you'll get to the town, and there's a grain elevator, and you'll fly by it, and you'll see another one in the distance. So that was, the main thing. About what, 15 miles is Haswell from Eaves?
It's about 20, I guess.
20, okay. So you go down the road.
There it is.
About 2 miles from a little area, you'll go, what is that? And your GPS is taking you there because I was pointing it. And so we get to it, you see big pictures of Rich, and that's the backside. They actually had that morning, there's a dipole hand guys got Richard, I think, to we was checking out the feeder. But they had an accident, they had a lot of wind before, and it basically jarred something, and the feed horn got loose, and part of it dropped, the choke of it dropped. But I'll tell you, there's the counterweights. And if you join, there's going up to the top, and climb, there's a couple ladders there. If you give them donation, they'll let you climb part of the dish and you can get up to the top. I only climbed to that area, the very top flat part, so the counterweights were out here. And it's but I was just, didn't take a lot of other pictures, but it just amazed me. The same thing with Little Thompson is, it was a nice facility, and I shouldn't have discounted it in my mind. I discounted it in my mind when it was generator powered. A very nice person gave them a lot of money, and they got extended electrical service, single phase electrical service there, and about part of a year ago. And at that point, it's like they had nice facilities, and they do have facilities. So I'm saying they're using very thing. They got this railroad on the electrical box, and they put a brand new device in it, and when you need to go, you can go.
True.
You can announce the official name for that, or no?
Well, I don't know what they may call it. Rich would call it the head. But, the communication trailer, you've seen pictures of it before, and there's a picture. But it's just a rack with some equipment. It is tight. They're having an open house, I think, on the 10th. Is that right? 10th?
Sometime soon, I don't know.
Yeah, in the next week or so. Basically, it's Deep Space Exploration Society, DES.science. It's not com.net, it's .science is the new website. And so they're trying to raise money, and they are talking about putting another building in and expanding. They have the bunker you saw the pictures of. And if you were there in a certain period of time, this is where Skip lives, right here in front of that computer. He wasn't there that second, but this is Skip's searching for everything. And so he just had to have a picture of where he was.
The Matrix?
Yeah. And so that's basically it. My point was, I shouldn't have belittled, it's probably a bad word, the guys out in Colorado. I was very happy with the trip and saw stuff I never thought I would see. And it was just enjoyable. I was dreading driving that distance. But it was just, once you got out of the city and there was no traffic, I enjoyed it. I did see a little hill in the distance one time, and there was a compressor station for natural gas. And I said, that'd be a good place to sit if you were highway patrol. And so I slowed down below 80, slowed down the speed limit, and there was one there, and I waved at him and kept on going. So, what just did a little bit, and Rich and everybody were saying that if you do go, on a serious note, carry extra gas. Always keep it super full, because you have to go a long distance for about 2 hours to find fuel. That's not fun in the middle of the night if you're going home. But it was a real nice facility, and they're open for anybody driving by. They're also open, they will take your money if you would like to donate and join your organization. And they have about every two weeks, every Tuesdays, they have an engineering meeting and a kind of facility engineering meeting. I participated a couple times online, and they've got a really bunch of group of guys. There's one guy that is like a country guy, but he's a facility. He maintains the whole facility, makes sure the pumps are going, there's no water in the building, this is going. He gets a big tractor, and they go out there and mow. And so it's a group effort. So between there and Little Thompson, it's like, Little Thompson's doing a lot of educational outreach, as you heard from Jay. It just amazes me when you get a bunch of people together doing good stuff, things happen. That's it. You get to talk about everything. Basically, what we're doing, what we're not doing, and
What's that?
how we're gonna do the,
How we're gonna do east or how we're gonna do?
well, we know we're gonna do, west is probably gonna be in March, right?
That's right.
It's gonna be in March. We think it's VLA. The word tentative is there.
Is there any percentage, like we're 70% we're gonna make it, or you just don't know? yet?
I don't know, I have to write the director, and I have not done a damn thing on this whole thing since Boulder, so when I get back to Seattle, I will tell you.
No worries. Okay, but I mean, that's the intent, that's what we're.
That's the intent, I'm planning on Socorro, and if I change my plans, you'll know about it.
Excellent.
I think ours is 85% chance today, so give you, Sue Ann's waiting on this one group to answer her, but she's just about positive, so, but I'm sure use the word tentative there. I also would do a little bit better updating, the website, which somehow I thought by osmosis, when I did my stuff and got a schedule, it somehow jumped on the web. I was very forward to doing that, so we'll make that better and have a little bit more headroom and look forward looking so we can get the brochures printed earlier, so if there's a problem, we won't be trying to pass down.
One of the things that I would like to do is, I'm trying to get the outdoor, in the back of the dormitory where we set up, because now we've got network, we've got power, and I'd like to get right now we have 2 tables and 2 canopies. I'd like to go to a 3rd canopy and a 3rd table and expand that and get that mainly for the beginners and anybody else, bring your stuff and demonstrate it, etc. That's one of the things I'd like to do. Like I said, we're doing 2 tables and 2 tents, and they worked well when it rained. It at least kept it off your head. But we could do a 3rd if we wanted to, and there's enough examples and stuff. I know Lister, he brought his
We're not planning.
etc. And I think that's, especially for the beginners, like Tom Hagen, he created his, he made it out of galvanized. And here, Lister, he made it out of just aluminum sheet, so.
And what's the gentleman from Washington D.C. that has the one horn out there?
Limestone.
Yes. Yeah. And he made it out of Mylar with the bubbles in it.
I loved it, I would have.
And he says it actually works very good, as bad as it looks. He says it stayed outside over a year. He says every now and then he has to dump water out of it. I might put a wheat bowl at the bottom. But, it can be crude, but it still works. So he was having problems last night with it, but I saw it working last year and it was amazing to me. I was sitting there, is this in the work? Yes, it worked. And there's something very similar to that of Open Radio Telescopes.org, I believe. It's the West Virginia University's.
We had a group last year, the year before, it was
Yeah.
high schoolers,
Yes.
and they were making horns and similar to this. As a matter of fact, he was, that particular design was here last year.
Yes.
They were demonstrating it out here outside the door.
If you see any opportunities for STEM and you can't do it, or some ideas we haven't thought about, please let us know. I was going to try to have some STEM. There was one lady, Ellie, I was trying to get her, she's in the University of West Virginia, or one of the universities, one of the colleges here. She's trying to go for astronomy. And she was here all week. She was being featured at a documentary, so she was the lady with curly hair that had a bunch of cameras following behind her all week. And she told me, she says, I'm going to be very busy. She didn't say what she's doing, but now I know. So her and her mother are very passionate about STEM and sort of keeping technology in West Virginia. So they got real excited and had a couple of videos and stuff when they were talking about closing, they were changing the facility's focus.
I was going to also say, Tom Hagen and I, we're teaching a class right now in our local library on Circuit Python. It's Python with hardware extensions so that you can turn LEDs on and off and do things like that. But what I would like to do for next year is come up with something that's more geared towards radio astronomy. But we're trying to teach, it's basically middle school. And it's interesting, I thought I had a short attention span. It's, I heard like squirrel. You know, so, and they're off doing something by the time you're trying to do something.
Ed and Hagan had a little paper about trying to do basically look for pulsars on the cheap. It's on the USB stick. They may or may not have made it on the paper copy because one of the couple of those were late. And the same thing for the Circuit Python. I think it made it in there, but we just decided to do other things here. Some of it was scheduling conflicts, but the Python definitely will be more useful. It's a language a lot of people are going to. So
I think you've heard of Adafruit, and that's where that comes out of, the new Circuit Python. And they come up with the nice little boards and nice little experiments. They have a Circuit Playground Express, and it has LEDs on it. It has inputs, outputs. Even has a tiny little speaker, so you can it's like $30, $25 to $30, and you can get Adafruit even puts out I think it's called Mu is the name of the editor, and it interfaces with Python 3, it introduces with SARA Python, and it's free. You can download it and start it. So.
anybody got any comments, discussions, things that didn't work well? More chicken strips?
I'd like to bring, next year, I'd like to also bring in a few more class type environments similar to the antenna gentleman. It was kind of like all that old things you learned many years ago, and it sort of jarred it loose. So I really enjoyed that. So.
Okay. You want to do door prizes?
Let's do door prizes, and I think what happened, I kind of had it was interesting. I think Dennis left with all of the tickets. So we don't have, so what I was going to ask everybody to do is if you could write down the number on your ticket, and then we can collect them and we'll do it that way. This has been, we're kind of trying, we've changed a few